Well, for any company today, it's important that you not only think about your business of today and your customers of today, but at the same time start preparing for the future. And that really is what strategic innovation is about. For me, one of the reasons why I wrote the book titled Customer Innovation is to bring those two sides together, because I think nowadays no company has a luxury to be innovative from the inside out. You know, we need to be innovative outside in. And so it means, listening to the market, listening to current needs, but also trying to understand future needs. And from that point of view, translate that back to what does it entail for us? How do we need to adapt? How do we need to change?
I think that marketing and innovation cannot live without each other. And for me, one of the biggest bridge between marketing and innovation is the strategy. For me, strategy, and let's break it down in a more academic, let's say, step-by-step approach, is really this understanding of strategy definition, strategy analysis, strategy formulation, and last but not least, strategy implementation. And I would like to come back to a very big issue we have, unfortunately, with the term innovation. For a lot of companies, actually, innovation remains let's say, a very frustrating pursuit between failing and success. And I think one of the biggest issues a lot of companies have is to keep the capacity and also the possibility to stay innovative. As Marion already highlighted, if you would like to stand out of the crowd, if you like to focus more on revolutionary offers than evolutionary offers, you really have to understand what the market needs, wants, and fears, and really understand how can we be unique. And the innovation process, and I'm not going now into details how an innovation process actually works, but really helps to stand out of the crowd, to stand out of the mass, and that is also the strategic part behind the linkage between marketing and innovation.
I think we need to work on all levers. Like you said, if I look at what you call the first lens, it's what can we do better, what we do already today. I see a lot of companies really invested, for example, in innovation in that area still. If we think about one of the domains that we are focusing on is digital transformation. And if you take the analogy with the image that you used on photography, we all know the example of Kodak. Imagine if Kodak could do everything again, and they would only be focused on doing digital transformation like most companies do it today. The only thing they would achieve is faster bankruptcy. They would make sure that they could interact with their customer on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. They would make sure that you could order your photographs online. They would make sure that it would be delivered to you on the doorstep, etc. But they would not have changed digitize the fundamental core of what they were doing. And I see a lot of companies active on that first layer, where you can achieve a lot in efficiencies, but where you're not really rethinking towards a digital future, and where you are not really rethinking about the alternatives that could be substitutes to you. And I think it's one of the challenges that we all have, because we haven't really addressed the topic yet, I think. It's the technologies that are coming towards us. The shift that we are seeing in terms of digital capabilities, software eating the world, and we all have in our mind examples that are pretty straightforward, but I'm really a believer that most of the things that we are doing are going to be substituted by a digital twin. And there are very, very few companies working on their core product, thinking about how is my product going to be digitized in the core. And I think in that domain, because that's a domain that is developing very, very quickly, where I think we have a role to play towards medium-sized companies, towards our customers, because a lot of that innovation, of that digital transformation is happening on the platforms of the hypergiants, which are our partners. It's the Microsofts of this world, the Amazons, the SAPs, etc., the Googles, the Facebooks, Apples that really drive innovation, that bring capabilities like machine learning, AI, augmented reality, which is going to be massive. blockchain technologies, etc. And we have to try and bring that transformative power, because I don't think of those capabilities as innovation domains as such. For me, they have a sort of transformative power like electricity had it. It's going to transform any process, tool, object, person, but it's going to bring it in a totally new reality that very few of our customers already can imagine. If you think about 10 years down the line, we are all looking at new smartphones being brought out, but probably 10 years down the line, we will not be flicking out our smartphones anymore. We will be just carrying probably some compute power or a connector to compute power. We will be loaded with chatbots that will automatically interact with each other to fix slots in agendas, to make payments because you borrowed me some money, etc. And that kind of innovation is going to be there very quickly, and it's a type of innovation that I would see in the third lens, in the revolution, and we have a role to play in there. So, as much as we are looking at those technologies to drive efficiencies, do things better, do things differently, we also have to bring them to our customers and engage with our customers in a co-creation process to help rethink their business.
Well, basically, we all know this. We know that customer experience is important. We know that, developing products based on customer input is important. And the key question is, why don't we do it then? And I think the main answer is there is an enormous tension field between short-term and long-term objectives. You have a daily business to run, you have products to sell, you have, your KPIs to be met. But on the second hand, next to this, you also need, start developing new products that align with. And how do you basically divide your resources and your focus on both areas? And that's the big challenge, I think, for most companies and even marketeers. And often you see these, what they call the bimodal models, where you have almost like a sub-team who's working on the daily business, and you have some, call it lucky guys, who are working on the future.
Who can do a little
That's not ideal neither. And I think, at least for me as a marketer, that's the biggest challenge today.
I think Jan addresses the concept of the innovation dilemma that we're all bumping into. And the interesting or the terrible thing about the innovation dilemma, I think, is it's not somebody's fault. It's a structural issue in an organization. You have to drive growth, you have to create the oxygen to do the innovation. But as soon as the engine stutters or the market is not picking up, you really get into a crunch, and what do you do then? And I think it's really difficult, and we should not be, we should be transparent about it. It's really difficult at that moment to really continue going for that innovation and not falling back on your traditional business that generates immediate profit instead of banking on the future profits.
And indeed, that dilemma is that it actually makes sense, to focus on the short term and to focus on what you're doing well and to focus on exploiting your existing capabilities. And so the way around that is, either to create this bimodal structure, which also has its disadvantages, because then to not have, not be talking to each other, and it's very hard to then bring it inside. Or to indeed expect it, at every unit in the organization. And, you mentioned it's about resource allocation, making sure that, you really make sure that you reserve resources, not only for lens 1, but also for lens 2 and 3. It's also about, about KPIs, about really drilling down, do we measure what we want to achieve? There's a lot,
Okay.
We tend to produce things at a daily basis as academics in terms of insights and thinking. And if we do it well, it's also very practical. I tend to say nothing is useful as a good theory. And so, I hope the academic world is not removed from the world of practice. That being said, what I introduced in my book is a way to look at your market through 3 lenses. And the first one is sort of where you zoom in on your current customer base, current activities, current products, and where you constantly ask yourself, what can we do better today than we did yesterday, which is really focused on what I call innovation with a small I. incremental innovation. And in the second lens, you zoom out. You take a broader perspective away from the product towards what's really the solution that customers are looking for. So, models that are helpful there is solution-driven thinking, design thinking, absolutely as well. Thinking about the entire customer journey. Even simple practices like think about when your customer uses your product, what do they do 10 minutes before, what do they do 10 minutes after? Very simple ideas of helping you extend where you could add value for your customers. And then in the third lens, you really zoom out even broader and think about what could be alternative business models that could entirely displace what we are doing today. Like for example, today I drove into Brussels. Maybe I could have taken an Uber. Maybe next thing you know, I'll take a driverless car. And so it's the same sort of function, it's the same job to be done for the customer. By the way, that's another model, job to be done thinking. But it's replaced by an entirely different business model. So I think I mentioned already quite a menu of food for thought.
Absolutely, you did. And probably the third one is probably the most difficult one, and it's the easiest way to approach this is to go step by step.
Well, I can imagine you say it's the most difficult one. On the other hand, I also think that companies really underestimate the difficulty of simple lens one incremental innovation, because that is the job of everybody. And we sort of tend to forget it. We tend to remain with the status quo. And we also tend to underestimate it. What I see today is when we talk about innovation, we indeed think about things like, innovation, that's driverless cars, or that's blockchain, of which we don't even yet know what it is. But innovation is also just, thinking about, what we do every day and how we can do that better. And we underestimate the tremendous importance that has. I always refer back to a statement by Jeff Bezos from Amazon, who once said, 70% of the value that we created for our customers and for our business comes from daily incremental innovation. It's not necessarily what we associate with Amazon, but clearly they're recognizing this is where a lot of your energy should go to.
I think it's a challenge, but it's a challenge we cannot not take up. And it's, I think we are really living in a totally different business environment than that we used to 25 years ago. And if you really want to play in that environment, to be sustainably competitive, you absolutely have to work on all levers. And what are we doing concretely around that is we have launched, for example, it sounds like common sense, it's listening to your customer, etc. But it's to driving that customer experience and understanding much further down than what we used to do. So I think as a company, we've always been good at looking at the temperature of our customers, and we have a very, very detailed understanding of acquisition and churn rates, and we know if they're moving to the competition or why they swapped, etc., etc. But we didn't really always go and ask them, how do you feel, what do you need, etc. We had the tendency, and if I can just take the metaphor of going to a restaurant, we had the tendency to be concentrated upon, really being concentrated upon the meal that we were serving, not how we were serving it, if we were asking the customer if he wanted to drink with that, if he was feeling comfortable in the environment that he was sitting in, etc., etc. The whole total experience, I think we are putting that much more into perspective. And within that customer experience program, we're also doing things like voice of the customer boards. So we really go out to our customers and we sit down and we say, look, we know that we need to design some of our tools. We don't want to design them on our own. It's not just us putting requirements down and then letting the engineers develop them. It's really about what do you need. Maybe we can have some quick workarounds and already solve some of your issues that you have there. I can tell you, in the beginning when we did that, a lot of our customers were surprised. You're not pushing something towards us, and really engaging in those conversations. And what we see is that some of our customers are now putting that up, their own voice of the customer boards in their own environments. So I think that holistic view is something which we are really taking to heart, at which we are starting. I think it really comes in the slipstream of the whole Fit for Growth strategy that's been laid out. It's just like innovation is central. The whole customer experience has become central to our strategy wheel.
To this, and I fully agree, because it emphasizes your authenticity and the fact that you're honest towards your customers. We've seen it in the panels that we are doing. One particular customer, we had some risk losing him. Taking him up in the panel really changed his mind, because we openly discussed, okay, we do know we have some issues there and there in these processes, but it was really appreciated. So again, it's also about, it's not only coming together to a new solution or a new product, it's also about making a connection with this customer.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit, in the last years, I really had the feeling that marketing is going a little bit back to basics. Marion just said, if you really would like to understand what kind of value can you contribute to your customer, you have to understand, first of all, his problem. And you have to understand how can you solve his problem. And I have a very basic way of what I'm also teaching in my lecture, is first of all to understand what kind of solution can you provide to make the life of your customer more convenient. How can you actually solve his problem? And talking about new models, and I don't really like the word new models. I have a lot of companies who are always coming to me and they said, give me the remedy for healing that, let's say, sickness, that we're not able to attract more customers and to increase our sales. There are not really new models. What we do is we rethink existing models just in our environment, in our quite fierce and challenging environment. And I'm just thinking about, Marion just said, who takes the time today to listen and observe customers, to really get an insight what the customer needs, wants, and fears? And here, a very simple model which we actually use in our education is the art of insighting, meaning observe the customer, try to understand meaningful clues, try to define assumptions, and get an insight. That, for instance, could be one of the models. Then inbound marketing. That is something a lot of people and especially companies are always asking, can you explain me inbound marketing? And what is so new about inbound marketing? Inbound marketing, and I have to break it down, is nothing else than switching from push marketing strategies to pull marketing strategies in a way that we are trying to engage more our customers, to be more involved, to actually have this understanding of this customer experience, customer journey, to really try to understand where are all the touch points of our customer, and perhaps also a last understanding. And I have a quite broad understanding of a holistic marketing approach. And there is where, again, innovation and marketing I think are quite close. In my opinion, there are also the two key elements of business success which have to be balanced well, is really this understanding that we have to have an integrated understanding of all the departments also in our company. Where can we create, let's say, in the so-called value chain, supply chain in our company, where we start from creating the offer until the delivering and also the after-sales service, where in each of these sections can we create value and also touch the customer at each touch point. So I think it's a holistic 360 degrees marketing approach where innovation also has a quite important place. And that's a little bit all. And perhaps one last thing, and I would like to perhaps emphasize on that, talking about this very challenging landscape we are right now. And I still remember when I was sitting in my marketing lecture, we said we talk about B2B and we talk about B2C. Typical, the big distinction between those two worlds. Today, it's quite difficult to draw a thin line between B2B and B2C. When we look a little bit at the landscape, today we have C2B, customer to business, we have customer to customer. And today I have a very provocative, let's say, understanding that even today B2B can learn from B2C and B2C can learn from B2B. And that we have more and more approaches which really goes into the understanding of B2B to C, H to H, coming back to this, or human to human, sorry, I'm a little bit in my own language, so H to H means human to human, where we have this understanding of this holistic lean approach, marketing approach.